Thank you, Dr. Archana, and our three panelists for sharing your very detailed insights, and a lot of good information came out. And yes, to our audience, sorry we are unable to take all the questions, but as mentioned by Archana, if our panelists, and I think some of our panelists from session 1 are still here as well, so we welcome you to please help to answer the questions in the Q&A chat box by typing in the response. So we will now move on to session 3, and we are running a bit behind time, and I hope that's okay for our moderator and panelists. The focus of session 3 is on public-private partnership and stakeholder engagement. And to moderate this session, I would like to invite Dr. Noni Sri Ayati Purnomo. Dr. Purnomo is the President Commissioner of Bluebird Indonesia. She began her career at Bluebird Group as a member of the technical staff and the stepping stone to becoming the President Director of Bluebird Group Holding and Commissioner of PT Bluebird. And as shown on the slide, Bluebird is a very innovative company which has launched several sustainability programs such as electric taxis in Jakarta and Bali, is also implementing some programs together with WWF, and is involved in several public-private partnerships in Indonesia. So Dr. Purnomo, I hand over the floor to you, please. So again, maybe I can go ahead and just remind our audience about the event reminders that this session is being recorded. And I think you are all quite an expert in posting questions. We're getting a lot of good questions in the Q&A chat box. So please continue posting your questions. And we will be posting all the materials from this event, including the recording, in the Dev Asia page, as well as the S20 website and Clean Air Asia website. Okay, so maybe while we are waiting for Dr. Purnomo to come back, I will, on her behalf, till she joins, I will go ahead and introduce our panelists for this session. So first in this session, we will have Mr. Puput Sefruddin. He is the, I think, if you can show the other, okay, we are starting, yes. So Mr. Puput Sefruddin, he is the Executive Director of Coalition for Phasing Out Lead Gasoline, which the acronym is KPBB. KPBB, this is an NGO for air pollution, clean fuel, and urban environmental issue. Puput is also the chair for Sustainable Mobility Working Group of MASKI, which stands for Indonesian Society for Energy Efficiency and Conservation. He has conducted research, analysis, and advocacy on issues covering fuel economy and low carbon emission vehicles, clean energy, sustainable mobility, and control strategy for air pollution. Next, we have Mr. Paul Butar. He is the co-founder of Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization. And over the past 15 years, he has worked in low carbon and climate change issues, including in the implementation of greenhouse gas emission reduction projects under the Clean Development Mechanism, verified carbon standards, social carbon, or other carbon standards in various sectors, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, waste management, industrial emission, and forestry. And finally, our third panelist is Mr. Bjarne Petersen. He is the Executive Director of Clean Air Asia. Bjarne has broad international experience, particularly in environmental issues and sustainable development, with a proven track record of achieving meaningful impact through strategic leadership, resource mobilization, and team building at all levels. He has taken Clean Air Asia through continuous growth, both regionally as well as in China and India, including broadening the work of Clean Air Asia to include the air, climate, and public health nexus. So a very warm welcome to our three panelists. And I'm wondering whether our moderator is back. Okay, so our moderator is not yet back. So I think since we are already running behind time, perhaps on Dr. Purnama's behalf, if I can get started with the questioning, and if I can request my colleagues to please try to call her and see if she is able to join the session. So we will begin with the first question for Mr. Puput Saifuddin. Mr. Saifuddin, within the ASEAN region, Indonesia, Jakarta in particular, is known to have poor air quality. As one of the NGO leaders actively advocating clean air, what is your view on the current situation? And what can the government do better to combat air pollution? And what could the government do to better engage the private sector to address air pollution? So over to you, Mr. Saifuddin, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, Ms. Karma, and also thank you very much for the great question in relation about the current status air quality in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta. Yes, if we talking about the air pollution in Indonesia, actually we have long years faced the situation with the poor air pollution in Indonesia. So probably the big question, how to be consistent on science-based policy for clean air and climate co-benefit in Indonesia? Yes, because actually we have many research, many analyses, but sometimes we just avoid that study and also analysis. The next, please. Yes, talking about the current status of air quality in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta, you can see in the slide that's this is 1 decade of the air quality monitoring data. I take this data from city government of Jakarta. So you can see that's especially with the PM10, PM2.5, and also with the sulfur dioxide. Another is ozone, or yes, ground ozone level that's exceeded the standard. So we can mention that's actually people in Jakarta, at least in this decade, from 2011 until 2020, faced the situation with the worsening air pollution. And of course, if you can see in the table in the below of this slide, any health effect of the air pollution in Jakarta, like RE or acute respiratory infection, asthma, bronchopneumonia, pneumonia, COPD, and also like the coronary artery disease. That's a health effect come from the air pollution. Yes, of course, many things has been done by government, private sector, and also civil society. But you can see we still face the situation with the worsening air pollution. And of course, if we look at the source apportionment of the air pollution in Jakarta, we can see also that the mostly pollutants is come from the motor vehicle, and secondly from industry, and the third from the road dust, and then also from open waste burning, from domestic, and also from another like from the power plant, but from outside of Jakarta. The next, please. Yes, if you look at to the source apportionment that I have informed to you before, that's of course the motor vehicle at the most polluters in Jakarta. So this is also relevant with the total population of the motor vehicle in Indonesia and also in Jakarta. And of course, this is also to be a national fuel supply burden. Every year, a government face this situation, and finally, government must import more than 40% and sometimes until 70% of gasoline. And then diesel fuel, we still import around 5 million kiloliter a year. I think that's a big number thing, and also can influence our monitor. And the next, please. And of course, as I mentioned before, actually, government, private sector, and also civil society hand in hand in relation how to address the emission. And if we're talking about emission reduction strategy, we define with the 5 aspects. That's a quality of energy, and secondly, energy economical technology, and the third, land use, traffic, and transport management, and then for the standard, and the lastly, law enforcement and incentive, disincentive. And of course, we all, government, private sector, and also civil society, try to do to reduce, to mitigate the emission, whatever for the air pollution, and also from the greenhouse gas. But you can see that's the right color. It's been something that's still pending and not implemented yet because many regions, especially because the political will from related stakeholder. The next, please. Please, the next slide. Actually, we have a yes, this is the vehicular emission standard that has been tried to be discussed by the previous slide, please.
Is it the correct slide, Mr. Puput? It's showing resume and recommendation.
Before slide, please. Two before. Let's see. Yes, actually, we have tried to establish the vehicle standard in Indonesia, like how we can establish the vehicle emission standard with based on Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, until Euro 6, something like that. But of course, finally, we just able to adopt the Euro 2 standard in 2007, and then to Euro 2 standard for motorcycle in 2013, and then in Euro 4 standard in 2018. And of course, if we success to implement that standard, it's mean we can effective to reduce the vehicular emission in Indonesia, and especially in Jakarta. And if you look at this slide, the TCO analysis for the low carbon vehicle, this is still challenge because as you know, in many countries there's also faced the similar situation where the TCO total cost ownership of the low carbon of vehicles still higher rather than higher carbon of vehicle like ICE technology, something like that. So of course we need to push with related policy like fiscal incentive and disincentive. So low carbon vehicle as a vehicle that have lowest operating costs and are effective to mitigate the greenhouse gas, and making them best choice or strategies to achieve the national determined contribution and also net zero emission. And of course, this must be says this green technology as our target on the green growth. The next, please. The last, yes. If I talking about the fiscal incentive and disincentive, it's mean how we can to give the penalty for excise for the car that has a carbon that exceeded the standard. Of course, the first government must establish the carbon standard for motor vehicle that would be produced and marketed in Indonesia. Otherwise, for the motor vehicle that's has a right to get the incentive from their performance in relation to get the lower carbon. And of course, if we success this one, we will get the economic benefits. That's I think big number from battery electric vehicle. If we success to adopt the battery electric vehicle in this year, it's in 2030, we will got the economic benefit until 9,600 trillion rupiahs. That's a big number. This come from the improving the health, public health of people in Indonesia, and secondly because increasing of the people productivity. And the important thing is any efficiency, so we can save the energy, especially from the gasoline and diesel. And as a resume and recommendation, again, that's various cities in Indonesia is still facing the threat of air pollution. And of course, one time we adopting the low emission vehicle for local air pollution, and LCV or low carbon emission vehicle for mitigate the greenhouse gas will provide a triple benefit for Indonesia. That's the first on the how we can do mitigate the air pollution and also greenhouse gas. It's been we able to mitigate 59% of greenhouse gas from motor vehicle business as usual with a baseline in 2010. And secondly, gain economic benefit of 1,000 trillion rupiahs in 2030. Because improving the air quality, improving of the people productivity, and also saving of the energy. And the lastly, this is also triggering a green economic growth through automotive and energy sector. And even though even more with Indonesia success in developing a low carbon emission vehicle, and supply on the raw material for electric vehicle battery like nickel, cobalt, and rare earth. That's a competitive advantage that which position Indonesia as an important part of the global EV manufacturing supply chains. And again, that's we need to implement.
Pak Puput, I think we're losing the connection. Okay, probably can you hear us, Pak Puput? Okay, this is actually what happened, you know, with the digital era. Okay, yeah, please go ahead, Pak Puput. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, yes, I think that's my last slide, Dr. Thank you very much for this. Hopefully we can discuss this.
Yes, thank you very much, Pak Syarifuddin or Pak Puput. So now let's hear from the second speaker, Mr. Paul Butar-Butar. So the question to you, Mr. Butar-Butar, you have been working in the field of carbon emissions trading and converting climate mitigation into business opportunities. You have now established your own company to support renewable energy investment and policy development. So how are investments in renewable energy progressing in the private sector of Indonesia? And also the second question, if I may, how can the government incentivize the private sector to increase investment in clean technology to improve air quality and reduce carbon emissions? Please, Pak Paul Butar-Butar.
Thank you, Bu Noni, for these questions. Let's say like that. Indonesia has a target to have 23% of renewable energy in the energy mix by 2025. In the last 5 years, there are only about 1,700 megawatt of renewable energy project that has been built, and this is because of some regulatory issues that has not make it clear that Indonesia has to go to prioritize renewable energy. And also that's because in the past government has pushed too much on building a coal power plant, which was assumed as a cheaper opportunity for providing energy. In the last months, starting last year is actually when the coal price increased significantly. In March, for example, the price reached about $400 per ton, and now is about $300 per ton. So people actually realized that generating electricity using a coal power plant is actually not as cheap as people thought. So only because of the set price by government of about $70 per ton of coal make the energy price is cheap, but actually in fact it's not cheap. So as mentioned by Ibu Noni, I have been involved in carbon trading for quite a long time, since I think 2004, working on carbon project developer that to date, for example, there are more than 150 projects that has been built in Indonesia, mostly actually renewable energy. We have huge potential, but have not been well utilized. We even have huge potential in the palm oil industries. We could utilize the waste to generate electricity, to generate energy, and so on. But unfortunately, the opportunities has not been taken seriously. So that's why we had a serious discussion in the past with Parliament, with Senate, about establishing a kind of renewable energy law. Starting in 2016 and 2017, Senate has proposed, has worked on the renewable energy law, and they have finalized that by 2017 and submitted to Parliament by 2018. And after that, Parliament initiated to establish the new and renewable energy law, which has been finalized and will be discussed with government soon. So we expect that having a strong law that provides strong legal basis for investment in renewable energy will allow private sector to really build to scale up the investment in renewable energy. On the other hand, PLN as the sole energy buyer will have a strong legal basis to buy more renewable energy. And this is the thing actually that we would like to see. Regulatory basis will be one of the very basic need in order to really push with the investment in renewable energy. A good thing is that government now have two things that will be implemented soon. that will help in reducing the air pollution. First is actually the so-called coal early retirement. After COP last year in Glasgow, there UK, US, Germany, and so on, about how to assist Indonesia to support the early retirement of coal. And there is a draft regulation, presidential regulation that will regulate on the tariff for renewable energy, but government put, let's say, a regulation for stopping the new development of coal power plant. So, and that will help actually, if it is implemented well, it will help really reducing the air pollution and can let's say develop, accelerate the development of renewable energy. That's the first one. The second thing is that the implementation of the carbon tax or carbon tax and carbon pricing. There are two regulations that have been passed by government. One last year. One is on the presidential regulation number 98 on the implementation of carbon pricing, and the second one is the law number 7, 2021. Where in that, as part of in one of the chapter 6, it mentioned about the carbon tax. So carbon tax has been designed and should have been implemented starting by April this year, and then postponed to July. And now we will not be able to implement that yet because the regulation is not ready yet. I happen to be part of the team that support government in preparing the regulation. There are still some discussion on how the regulation should be established, what kind of issues that need to tackle and so on. But we expect that this year we will have the first emission trading system combined with offsetting and carbon tax implemented in coal power sector. So this will be actually one of the good things that if we want to talk about the air pollution indirectly. So the policy regulations on related to coal power plant, if it will be well implemented, then it will really be able to curb the air pollution in Indonesia, especially from the power sector. However, when we talk about air pollutions, as my colleague Puput also has mentioned that one of the issues in Indonesia is really on the vehicular air pollution, and we have a short chat yesterday with Ibu Noni. Good to see that Bluebird, for example, take the lead in, let's say, building their electric vehicle, and we expect and we hope that a lot of taxi fleet later on, and even bus, Transjakarta started already with electric bus. All of this will help in let's say reducing air pollutions. Although Mas Puput always say, okay, if we let's say if we use electric vehicle, but the power plant still using coal, so actually we will not reduce a lot, but at least we will reduce the air pollution caused by the transportations. So, I mean, this is the thing that we need to support government and private sector in Indonesia in order how government will implement the carbon tax, the carbon pricing in Indonesia well. And this is the thing that we really need to contribute. And of course, when it comes to the incentive that is needed by private sector, one of the issue in the investment in renewable energy is actually on how the procurement could be done by PLN, and how if the carbon tax or carbon pricing is already well implemented, then we will see that there will be let's say impact on the price of the power generation using coal power plant. So, which means if we don't have, if government will lift all the subsidies to fossil fuel, then it will be easier actually for renewable energy to compete with fossil power plants, fossil energy. We even don't need incentive as long as the subsidy is lifted by the government. So this is, for example, the thing that we need to see, that if we really want to move forward with renewable energy, with electric vehicle and so on, then the first things that need to be done is really how to treat the subsidy, or how to take part of the subsidy and put it as an incentive to renewable energy, to electric vehicle and so on. So that's the thing that I could share with all of you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Butar-Butar. It's an enlightening indeed. So we're on our final panelists for this session. So please make sure to send in your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to those shortly. Now let's hear from Mr. Bjarne Pedersen. Mr. Pedersen, can you give us your perspective on how clean air programs are being carried out in Asian countries, and what lessons learned are applicable to Indonesia and or the developing Asia context?
Thank you, Dr. Noni. I can certainly do, and I'll try and be as short and succinct as possible in the interest of time. I'll start by first of all thanking the Indonesian presidency, the Indonesian Academy of Science, and of course ADB for putting this much needed and welcome event together. I'll try and look into three dimensions to answer your questions. Can I have my slides, please? I'm going to look at some challenges in implementing programs, some solutions, and specifically how stakeholder engagement plays a role in this respect. And just looking for my slides. Thank you. So first, in 2018, we released a report with ADB as part of a technical assistance project, identifying 7 common challenges. And these challenges actually chimes quite well with what has been highlighted in previous panels. Often challenges to implementing clean air and climate programs is insufficient air quality information to inform policy plans and programs. It was highlighted in the science panel, the need for data, emission inventory, and science-based policy interventions. We also see a challenge in limited technical capacity. To the theme of this panel, the lack of coordination among stakeholders in air quality management, air pollution and climate-related problems are multifaceted. And so is the need then to also bring in a variety of stakeholders to implement solutions. The policy frameworks was often mentioned as a challenge. Professor Hegeman in the previous panel put it as good policy and enforcement is needed. Here it's put like we often see challenges in terms of national air quality standard and enforcement. Insufficient financial resources and incentive schemes. Previous speaker mentioned the need to reform of subsidies. And finally, lack of mainstreaming of air quality concerns in urban development. The reality is that Asia is growing, cities in Asia is growing, and if we do not mainstream air quality concerns into urban development, we are not only not dealing with the current problem, but we are contributing to even more air pollution and climate emissions in the future. Next slide, please. I look towards some of what are the solutions? So it's interesting in talking about challenges. More importantly, it is talking about solutions, and this is where we go into what has worked and climate and clean air action planning. First of all, develop clean air action plans or climate and cleaner action plans with clear objectives, roles, and accountability. This has been highlighted in previous sessions today, and especially in the China experience of setting out a clear action plan supported by political will. And tighten ambient air quality standards to get as close as possible to the WHO air quality guideline, which were updated here in 2021. In terms of stakeholder engagement, it's important also to realize that the public is a stakeholder in this in many ways, including by experiencing the health impact of air pollution. Increase of political and public awareness on air pollution impact is vital to increase an enabling environment for implementation of control measures for controlling air pollution emissions. Enhancing technical capacity, especially in the assessment, planning, and implementation phases of clean air action planning. Controlling air pollution is not a simple task. It's multifaceted, it's complex, and there is certainly a need for technical capacity to lead the science-based implementation of measures in clean air action planning. Integration, strengthen emission prevention and control and use of economic instrument. Has been mentioned a few times that air pollution measures needs to be financed, and we need to make sure also that we put economic incentives in place for the right measures. And that is the last point of the recommendation, securing adequate financial resources. And I would stress here, this is at all levels, not only on a national level, but we are also especially talking on city level, many cities being on the forefront of struggling with air pollution problems. Jakarta was mentioned already in this panel, and the need for financing for sustainable development is critical. Last slide, please. So the key here, last slide, next slide. So to round up my two previous slides on challenges and solutions, we see a cleaner air as public participation and stakeholder engagement, including by the private sector, as absolutely critical to success, defined as reduction in air pollution and in greenhouse gas emissions. They are key to the success of cleaner action planning and implementation in each of the steps that is outlined here on the screen in terms of cleaner action planning. There must be a considered involvement of stakeholders, including the private sector, to make this a success. I'll give you a very concrete example. This is an approach that ADB takes together with Clean Air Asia and our partners in 7 cities in Asia, in 5 countries, Bangladesh, Mongolia, Pakistan, Philippines, and Vietnam, where we are assisting in developing science-based cleaner action plans backed up by finance and investment plans and supported by communications support. We hold a minimum of 6 to 7 stakeholder consultations in each city as part of developing and implementing the cleaner action plan, plus adding a communications campaign to make sure that there is an enabling environment for a cleaner action plan to be implemented, and not only implemented, but also to be an actual success and reducing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. I hope I've stressed the importance of stakeholder engagement, and especially also of the private sector. In Indonesia, we're looking forward to helping even more with this. We are planning a Cleaner Asia to open a presence in Indonesia later in the year. So we're looking forward to be able to help much more with cleaner action planning in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. So we now open the floor for Q&A. So please type your questions in the Q&A box. Okay, let me check on the Q&A at this moment. Okay, to Mr. Ahmad, in my opinion, regulations in Indonesia for all sectors are more than enough. However, implementation of the regulation is not running well. So what is your opinion?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Noni, for the to deliver the question from Mr. Mahidin Talib. Yes, I think agree with you, Mr. Mahidin Talib. Actually, in Indonesia, we have completed regulation, but of course, in the implementation, it's not running well, as you mentioned in the chat room. Air pollution, if you want to mitigate the air pollution, whatever air pollution or greenhouse gas, this is look like something that must be seized by all of part, especially from the private sector like that. I just would like to mention that's actually the too many interests on this issue. I just would like to give the example for the when we adopted the Euro 2 standard in 2007, and finally this standard must be postponed for 2 years, and finally until now also never run well because with the limited of supply on the gasoline and diesel that comply with Euro 2 standard. And again, for the Euro 4 standard that we have adopted in 2018, until now we also still have trouble on the supply of the fuel that's comply for Euro 4 standard. So, and finally, plan before like that. Why this is happen? Yes, again, you know, behind of the Euro standard, that's it's mean we need to push the auto industry to invest more money in relation to produce the car with the better standard like that. So that's the first interest, I think, from the auto industry. And secondly, from the oil and industry, that's also like that. In Indonesia, as I mentioned before, I think that's we have import 40 until 70% of the gasoline. And you know, 40 until 70% imported gasoline, that's dirty gasoline. Gasoline that's not utilized anymore in Europe, in China, in Japan, Thailand, and Malaysia, and India. So finally, a lot of supply of dirty fuel in the regional market. And finally, Indonesia is one of target as a dumping ground of this dirty fuel. So I think I just would like to mention that this is the example of the interest. So finally, the regulation, completed regulation, very good regulation in Indonesia to adopt the clean air and also low carbon of motor vehicle. And finally, this is just stuck because any interest from a Eastern part. And secondly, that's also because as Mr. Bjorn mentioned before, in Indonesia, environmental issue on the climate issue, that's still not as mainstream in the development. So, of course, this is our challenge, how we can to push this issue to be a mainstream in the development in Indonesia. If we success to push this issue to be a mainstream issue, I think that's more easier for all of us in relation to implement the policy based on, you know, if we have a strong policy as a mainstream policy, it's mean also very easy to get a budgeting from the country, something like that. So I think that's from my side, Mr. Mahidin.
Thank you very much, Pak Puput. I think we have one more question, but in light of the timing, the question is for Pak Paul Butar-Butar. Oh, there's two more. So, of the support needed by the private sector to increase their investment for clean air and climate solutions, what would you say need to be prioritized by the government? And is there any other additional support private sector needs from other sectors? For example, academia or civil society. Please, Papo. Papo, you're still on mute.
Sorry, sorry for that. Okay, thank you for that question. Thank you, Bu Noni. Yeah, as I mentioned, one of the very important aspect of investing is actually clear regulations that provide a kind of certainty for the private sector to invest in. Although the previous question raised about that sufficient regulation is already there, but when you look at that in more detail, is actually not. For example, there is a law number 30 in 2007. In the chapter 7, they mention about the price of energy, and the price of energy should have been determined based on the production price, environmental cost, conservation cost, and let's say, and then acceptable profit and ability to pay of the people. But because of this so blurred definition, then actually we have never got a kind of energy pricing that is really represent the economic price. We ended up of having all the subsidies. So because even for example, when we look at the definition, means actually the cost of air pollution, the cost of climate change, all this environmental cost has to be put into the energy price. But what we see now, even the rich people get subsidized due to this. The rich people do not pay the environmental cost. So the externalities has not been internalized. So it would be, for example, good if there is a clear definition of pricing, so that at the end, government or in this case, for example, the utility company of Indonesia, PLN, will be able to say this is the economic price, including all the costs, including the externalities. And then it is up to government saying, okay, this sector, this class, this community will pay only this part, but the rich people has to pay the complete set of the price. I mean, in Europe, I guess Mr. Pedersen will be able to say that the biggest part of the fuel price is actually tax, not the production cost. So this is how the regulations make it difficult really to price the energy. And this is the cause of all of this problem that we have, because let's say the thinking that the coal energy produced by coal power plant is cheap. That's actually the reason, because we don't have a clear regulations defining what is the price should be. And this is actually the very important aspect on even in the renewable energy. So if government have a clear regulation, clear definition of regulation, clear definition of price, clear definition of how the business should be done, how the transaction should be done between the private sector building the renewable energy power plant with the state utility company, then it will be much easier actually to develop renewable energy. So as I said, it might be at the end, if we take out all the subsidy, there is no incentive needed for renewable energy. We have seen that in many countries. So that should be my response, Bu Noni. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have so many more questions, but we have so limited time. So probably I'll take one for Mr. Pedersen. How can public participation and stakeholder engagement help improve enforcement and implementation of clean air and climate mitigation policies and laws?
I think it's a very good question, but also a very big one to end with. If I look at the first bit, which is enforcement, often is that more controversial, but the reality is that it's often the public that is most exposed to lack of enforcement from industries, vehicles, emissions, etc. And I think there are successful examples, including in Europe, where the public takes an active approach in monitoring implementation, especially in respect to industries. We ourselves in India actually run a project where we call them youth monitors, where they are using low-cost sensors to monitor emissions on city level and report it to the local authorities. That is on the enforcement side. While I say public participation and stakeholder engagement is critical to implementation, I also mean that if we do not ensure public buy-in for the policies to be put in place, then often the implementation of the policies will fail. I think the subsidies is an excellent example, because the true price will often, if you're looking at true prices on energy, you need to have a public understanding on what these true prices are and what the cost of the energy is and what the consequence of using that. So ensuring public buy-in in implementation of policies is critical to their success. And this goes back to one of the often overlooked needs, especially on city level, but also on national level, is the need for proper communication about what are the consequences of air pollution, what are the solutions that is available to us, and how can the public support the implementation on these solutions on two levels. So support policy measures via enforcement or helping pressing local authorities, but also importantly changing personal habits. We haven't really talked about this at all, but of course, in reduction of air pollution, there is a large element of how sustainable consumption, individual behavior can also help. It's not the magic solution, but can certainly help in reducing emissions by energy efficiency, changing habits, etc. Then finally, the notion of mainstreaming. I think mainstreaming is critical to implementation of control measures and implementation of clean air action plans. That for me, that means that a range of stakeholders needs to be involved in implementing these solutions. I know that sounds pretty vague, but we have more often than not seen that if the implementation of solution happens in silos, for instance, within local government agencies, they do not really fulfill their purpose. The transport agencies need to talk to the urban planners, that need to talk to their health authorities, who need to talk to the community groups to ensure that you actually deliver an all-round successful approach to implementation of control measures. And I keep coming back to implementation of control measures, because at the end of the day, that is what we're all here for. We are here to implement measures, policies, practices, and control measures that has a tangible impact and really lead to real reduction in air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. For that to happen, communication, public awareness, capacity building, stakeholder involvement, including mainstreaming of the agenda within public sector is critical, as well as with private sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pedersen. I know we're really running out of time, so I would leave it to the host to decide, because there is this one follow-up questions for Pak Paul about paraphrasing the question from Ricky Sikumbang. Do you have any suggestions on how interfacing of new technology can be adopted without any long permitting process. But Pak Paul, can you please give a very short answer for this?
Yeah, thank you, Bu Noni. Thank you, Pak Sikumbang, for these questions. Actually, if we look at the process now for permitting, it has been actually already improved quite significant, especially through the OSS. Of course, there is still some learning that we need to have, especially after the implementation of law on Cipta Kerja. There is still some adjustment needed, but I think with that process, there much improvement actually have been done by government on that part. Thank you, Bu Noni.
Thank you. So we learned from the three distinguished panelists that public, private, corporation, and stakeholder engagement is very much key to the success of clean air project and initiatives. So it is in our hands now to make sure that the initiatives do not end here. And it is our responsibility together to make sure that we save our planet Earth. So, and that's a wrap up for our final session. Let's give our panelists a virtual round of applause or thumbs up. And please stay to hear some final messages in the closing session. In the meantime, please don't forget to answer a short survey about this event. The link is provided in the chat box and will also be sent after the event, along with links to the event video recording and presentations. I now hand over to Karma Yangsom to introduce speaker for the closing session. Thank you very much.